Hi everyone, welcome to part two for the lesson, The Case for Writing Less to Say More. So again, for folks who are ready to begin looking at their writing at the sentence level. So part two will be focusing on verbs and word choice. So going back to how we finished off part one, let's look at passive voice. So what you'll be looking for are forms of to be. Okay, so forms of to be plus using verbs that are in past tense that's how you can recognize something's written in passive voice. So was, am, will be, right? So are all forms of to be for I, he, she, they, singular, was, is, will be, forms of to be, you, they, plural, were, are, will be, and did, do, will. So when you combine that with a past tense verb, that creates passive voice. So are looked upon, is viewed, be informed. These are all examples of constructions for passive voice in a sentence. So this is, again, this is when you're going to be looking at verbs. How can you change words to make them verbs, right? So the 5 essays were written by the student in one night. Okay, that is past. That's passive voice. So you can change that by utilizing wrote, right? The student wrote 5 essays in one night. Were written changes to student wrote to make that active voice. The full scholarship ride was won by you. That is passive voice. Okay, and you can change that to you won the full scholarship, right? So was won changes to you won to make it active voice. So you can resuscitate a sentence by verbing it up. And I have to be clear that verbing is actually not a word, but it's something you'll be doing as a writer. Excuse me. The students made the suggestion that class should end early. Okay, so the students suggested that class end early. The noun, right, becomes a verb. Suggestion changes to suggested. Okay, so that's one way, right, is turning some of the nouns that you have into verbs to make it more active. The students were bored by the teacher. Okay, the teacher bored the students. Okay, so the adjective becomes a verb, right? We're bored to bored, right? So you're changing the adjective to make it a verb, right? And so this is where, things like what you're trying to say, that's when you're beginning to look at what a sentence can imply, right? So good writers pay attention to these moments. This sentence can imply that the students are uninterested in school, right? The students were bored by the teacher, right? So often if we're framing it this way, we can make the students the ones who have to be accountable in the situation. But if you change it, the teacher bored the students, right? This sentence makes the teacher the one who is the most responsible for engagement in the classroom, right? So that changes the meaning, right? It changes who is responsible. I mean, I think it's both. But for the sake of this exercise, right, I'm pointing this out. And also, I think what I want to say is that I think too often we make students responsible for the ones who have to be held accountable and engaged. Not to say that teachers don't have a lot of responsibilities, but there's a shared responsibility here, right? Anyway, off of that. So when students write in passive sentences, there is the potential for it to read as generic. It often doesn't show the effort of your analysis. Okay. Spanish speakers are discriminated against, right? So this sentence really doesn't show how a student is making the connection between the rise of xenophobia as a result of political rhetoric, right? And that is what is in the student's head when they write this sentence, right? But it's not conveying that yet. So xenophobia fuels discrimination against Spanish speakers. Right? Here we've identified the specific reason, and this is what I mean by specificity when I'm telling you that, right? What is a specific reason? So xenophobia is a particular word, right? The writer decided to use a specific term that has political, controversial connotations, right? Using this word, choosing xenophobia is politically loaded. Okay, also an interesting word. I'm fascinated by X and Z words. So fuels, right, is an aggressive verb, right? You think fuels, you think something about power, maybe even fire, right? So the writer decides to keep discrimination as a noun, but to pair it with a verb that shows the writer's stance on the issue. Fuels discrimination. So in the first sentence, the first part of the sentence, the first three words are doing a lot of work. Xenophobia fuels discrimination, right? So you could even end there. You could put a period past after discrimination. But again, right, those three words are filled with a lot of tension already. Right, a lot of impact. Okay, so again, these are short, very, very short lessons. So some key takeaways, right? Edit down your sentences. You know, if you have more than 20 words in a sentence, I would look at it. You know, can it be broken down into two sentences, right? Sometimes two sentences are better than one, for clarity and for, you know, to be kind to your reader, right? Changing passive voice into active voice, and ways to do that is looking at how you're using words, right? Maybe you can change a noun to a verb. Maybe you can change an adjective to a verb, right? And then other ways are looking at the specificity of what you're really thinking about, right? What are key words that you can use that can better demonstrate what you're thinking? Okay, and use a thesaurus. I think a thesaurus is a really great way to learn new words because there is nuance to language, right? One adjective that is used for sweet, you know, sweet is kind of generic. Sweet can be used to describe a cupcake and apple, but those are two very different kinds of sweet, right? So looking at those particularities and drawing those beautiful nuances out in language. Okay, so that is all for this writing lesson. Have a great week, and I will be in touch about the final. Take care.